Well, my feeling has always been that when they speak to us in the NGOs, they keep saying, go out and talk to people, talk to the community. And that was where we found our particular skills seemed to work the best. I grew up in Quebec City. There were 80 Jewish families. The English-speaking population was fairly powerful economically. I mean, Anglo pulp and paper really ran the country. And the French-Canadian population was a large population. And I guess I was sort of always in between, you know. I guess there's a kind of international perspective that you get from growing up in this context that gives you a sense of familiarity and comfort with that situation.
Well, I was born in Belgium, and I came here at the age of around 11. But my early experiences in Belgium must have an impact on the way I think. I can't formulate it exactly, but I feel it.
Well, first of all, I think the American Ethical Union has always represented principles of reason, fact, knowledge, also in a humanistic concept, in a basic humanistic frame. And that really underlies everything that's going on in the UN, and nobody else is doing this. There is no way that we could be able to really engage ourselves with all these concepts and still get down to the fundamental principle. And I do have to say, and this is a bit of a digression, I've just written a piece on the history of the National Service Conference going back before it even was the National Service Conference. And I saw the way the principles that these women were really working with, barely in a very sort of straightforward way, really prefigured what ultimately started to happen within the United Nations as it develops. It's almost as if the two developed together. For example, when they were getting involved in population, they also became involved in food sufficiency. I mean, that's the kind of practical, concrete thing that these early women did. And that was exciting to me. And it was, later on, it was acknowledged. I mean, there was a letter from Trygve Lie thanking the women's group and saying that they were happy that such an active New York group would be involved. They were happy to be involved at the very birth of the United Nations. I mean, that's a specific example of a concrete connection that nobody else was making. Oh yes, well, I've done at least 5 of them, and in different societies. Well, we started, let's see, I gave one in Cambridge. Then I gave one at the Bergen Society, which is my home society. Then I've given one in Essex, and I've spoken in Brooklyn. I've also spoken in Northern Westchester and Long Island and Baltimore. And I probably will come back next year to Baltimore. And then a couple of people have been making feelers for Unitarian Universalist groups have been asking me to talk. So that would be interesting.
Yeah, I've given quite a few talks, at least 6, as I remember. I've talked about globalization, the ethical issues in globalization.
And you've given talks in universities also.
What?
You've given talks in universities.
Yes. There was one interesting talk that was about the UN model.
Oh, Model UN.
Model UN.
Oh, that was a huge
in New
affair.
Jersey, and I was the main speaker to introduce it. This with 300 high school students from all over New Jersey.
Right.
Well, the UN, as I see it, is a repository of our hopes, the hopes that are in tune with the principles of the American Ethical Union. Well, the hopes for more dialogue instead of confrontation, which I think for me is extremely important. And we would benefit from this right now if we have dialogue with Iran, which we haven't had since 1979. A favorite, we've written over 64 of them. It goes from the food program, the International Criminal Court, the human rights, the new Human Rights Council. I mean, there's an endless variety. Well, one that was recently published in Dialogue was about the Holocaust Memorial Day, which I found very moving. Why? Because, well, first of all, genocide is going on right now, and it's a very timely, unfortunately, extremely timely. And also, it introduces a change of attitude in the UN towards Israel.
Well, I guess what you're really speaking about is the creation of the Bergen County chapter of the United Nations Association. What happened is Living Room UN landed in my living room. And Azmat Hassan, who was, I think, a representative from Pakistan, came along, and Chuck Rawlings, the then president, came along, and I gathered a few people to come and hear him, and that was the way the Bergen chapter was born. I just have not had any trouble at all finding people who want to work with us. I mean, first, Fairleigh Dickinson, I mean, we had to work hard to get top big name speakers. That's, of course.
What are some of these speakers you've got?
Well, we got Professor Gary Sick, who was on the National Security Council under 3 presidents and is probably nationally and maybe even one of the world's best experts on American relationships with Iran. Oh, Ian Williams was a fantastic speaker. Well, I think there's an underlying feeling of support.
Well,
there's no question about that. And some people who are very sympathetic to the United Nations are disappointed because they see that there's so many tragedies going on and peace just isn't happening. And they really don't understand the structure of the problems or the structure of the United Nations and the role that it has. So they may be disappointed, but they don't really know about the tremendous successes the UN has had, even in peacekeeping, which don't get publicized.
Yeah, we saw this. We gave a course at least twice at the Bergen Community College, which is a local community college. And we had a nice audience, and we could see that there's a lot of misinformation that people have about the UN.
Yes, yes.
The press only reports the tragedies, which are, of course, tragedies, but they don't report the successes. Well, it was a $64 billion program, and the fact is that many people in Iraq were fed, children didn't die as much, health increased, but nobody reports that.